Welcome to The Art of Adventure. This is episode 264 with Nicolas Cole. The Art of Adventure is the podcast that helps you travel the world, run your business, and embark on an epic quest. I'm your host, lead explorer, and guide, Derek Loudermilk. And this episode is sponsored by the coaching portion of my business. And if you're trying to become a thought leader in your field and trying to create a business that lets you work from anywhere in the world, then it might be a perfect match. I invite you to go to derekloudermilk.com and apply for a free business strategy session with me. On to today's episode with Nicolas Cole, or Cole. Cole is one of those rare individuals who has gotten really good at several things. He's become world-class at many things in his life. And he started as one of the top teenage gamers in World of Warcraft, top ranked players. Then he started a blog about that, and he became one of the most read gaming blogs. Since then, he's gone on to become a bodybuilder and a fitness influencer. He worked for an advertising agency. Then he became a columnist for Inc. magazine, a top writer on Quora, and all of his writing has amassed over 55 million views. He's the founder of Digital Press, which is a ghostwriting agency for executives and thought leaders, which has grown in the last 2 years to 15 employees. And so he's here today to teach us how he thinks about building thought leadership through writing, and writing in such a way that it makes it easy for the reader, makes them want to engage, how you can build your unique voice through writing and attract a loyal following, and how thought leadership influences business. You'll also learn how Cole was able to get really high quality mentors in everything that he got really good at. So without further ado, here is Nicolas Cole. Cole, welcome to The Art of Adventure.
Thanks for having me, man.
And we were just talking about both of us finding ourselves in new cities. And what's your initial impression of New York?
Very busy. Very busy. In a good way.
I had a friend that moved to New York, and he said something like, people in New York are smarter because they encounter more people and ideas. And I said, yeah, whatever. You're just using that as an excuse to stay in New York. But do you think there's any truth to that?
I'll say I've only been here 10 days. I've only visited. I've never really lived here. So I'm on day 11 or 12 right now. And the one thing that I didn't expect is I do find people to be very grounded here, but in a way that I didn't anticipate. Because living in LA, I think has that kind of stigma where it's, you go to LA and you do yoga and you eat super healthy and you're enlightened, quote unquote, And so New York, I kind of just knowing what you hear, you think you're just going to walk into it and people are just like, go, 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 go. They don't have any time for you, whatever. But I find that even though it's very busy, people are still very connected and they're very present. I almost feel like how busy the city is kind of makes you have to be very present and focused within yourself because everything else is so loud. So I've enjoyed that a lot. I think the people here are great.
That's an interesting observation. I've only been to New York City a couple times, and when I first went, I was living in a small town in Montana, and I was afraid of New York because I thought, oh my gosh, I've been living in a town of 20,000. Am I going to be able to handle it? And then I arrived at rush hour, and I was trying to go the opposite direction of all the commuters, and it was just so crazy. And I was like, I hate New York. And then, after a couple of days, I was, wow, New York is so much better than I thought. All right.
It definitely takes an adjustment.
Yeah. So let's talk about, there's so many interesting things, but what I thought we'd start with is to talk about your writing. And I was reading a bunch of your articles before this interview, and I was like, I like Cole. I like this guy, and this is good writing. And I couldn't immediately put my finger on why why it's good writing or why I like you, but I know that you think intentionally about how to make writing good and how to find your voice. So maybe you could share some of the things that you try to work into your writing that causes it to have that feel of, likability and wanting to read more of them.
It's a great question. I don't know anyone's ever asked me that like that directly. I think there are a few mechanisms. One is that I have an immense amount of respect for my reader, quote unquote. So what I mean by that is if you are giving me the time to read, I'm not going to waste my time with talking. And I think, and what I mean by that is, growing up, I actually didn't read a lot. I was really, really bored with books in school. I really didn't start reading until college. And truthfully, the only reason that I read was because I walked into a creative writing program and I realized that everyone else around me was so well read. Like we would read something and some kid would be like, "Oh, that reminds me just like, of Nabokov's Lolita," and then I would sit there and go, "I've never even heard of that book." And so I think it was this very competitive part of me that was, I didn't want to be the dumbest person in the room. So I started reading a lot. But when I was growing up, I had a lot of trouble with it because I was also a gamer. I was an aspiring pro gamer. And as a gamer, my mind was moving so fast and I was so used to processing so many pieces of information so quickly that when, I think when school gave me a book where it took 4 pages for you to feel any sort of real movement forward, like I look at really old literature sometimes and they like describe the door for a page and a half. And I'm like, can we just walk through the door? Can we just get, and I struggled with that a lot. Like I really couldn't get down with it. And so I think when I started writing online, and I've always known this about the internet moves so quickly. So in my own writing, I've really tried to write in this way where I'm not wasting your time. If you click and start reading, I'm going to only give you the necessary pieces of information that's going to keep your eye moving. And by doing that, you create this feeling where I've had people say this where they go, I click on your article and before I even realize that I'm reading it, I'm done with it because it can move so quickly. And I think it's that mechanism that makes someone go, I can read one, and then because that didn't feel like it took me that long, I can read the second, and then I can read the third, and before you know it, you've read 50 of my articles, and it's that I always strive for. And same thing with my company. Now I have a writing company, so what I train all of our writers and editors to do is to really question: is this truly moving it forward for the reader? And if not, get rid of it. And I think it's that trimming of the fat that really makes the difference.
So say you have a sentence or a paragraph or whatever, how do you assess whether it's moving it forward?
So here's a great example. So let's say I start a blog about how to start your own podcast. So in the very first paragraph, I go, starting a podcast can be really difficult. The biggest challenge in starting a podcast is understanding that it's going to be a challenge. And even though it's a challenge, you really have to admit to yourself that you're going to be able to overcome this difficult obstacle in front of you. That's 3 sentences all saying the exact same thing. They're all saying starting a podcast is hard.
So it's too much.
It's too much. And so whenever I'm reading something or whenever I'm writing, a lot of times writers fall into this thing where it's like you write sentence after sentence after sentence and you have 800 words, 1200 words, whatever, but you might have an entire page all saying the exact same piece of information. Starting a podcast is hard. So that's where you have to assess that thought is the only thing that matters. Starting a podcast is hard. Don't repeat that. Now what's the next thought? The next thought might be, but it's easier than you think. You just have to know these 3 things. That's the next new piece of information. Mm-hmm. And then And then what's the next new piece of information, you know? But even if you do these three things, you're still going to be faced with these other X challenges. Break those down. So you're always questioning what is the next new piece of information instead of restating the same piece of information over and over again. And when you do that, that's what makes a reader go, this is dumb, this is boring, I don't like this didn't give me any value. It's like when you click on a blog and from, you know, like a digital marketer, or you see this with company blogs all the time because they pay really, really inexperienced copywriters, right? So the company blog is like 5 trends you need to know about social media. In this day and age, social media is super important. And social media will continue to be really important. And that's because without social media, you don't have a very meaningful social media strategy. And you're just like, good God. Like, you could have said all of that in like 4 words. So it's this idea of not wasting the reader's time that I think is like always at the forefront of everything that I do.
And are you, I guess I'm assuming that at this point you're able to just write like that and with less editing. But I'm curious about the process that, you know, for someone who's less polished than you. I'm assuming trimming the fat is like a hard editing process once they've written the first time through.
So there's definitely a learning curve. So I've experienced this in 2 different directions. One was how I got there, and then one is how I now see I train writers to get there. Okay. So how I got there and just how I learned is I wrote 4,000 articles on the internet. So by pure volume, you subconsciously learn, when I write like this, it performs better. When I write like this, it doesn't. And 10 turns to 20, turns to 50, turns to 100. Like, it was just volume that taught me that. And I didn't actually know how conscious that was until I then started a company and I had to take a brand new writer and go, now I have to teach you how to do what I do. And that's where I took a lot of these things that were very subconscious and made them conscious. And I find that with most writers, the moment that you really go through a piece and you start asking them and you go, what is that sentence really saying? And what is the next sentence really saying? And are they fundamentally saying the same or different things? That's where you start to read differently. You start to think differently. And so the first step is getting that light bulb to go off, where you start to not see words for the sake of words, but see words for what they're fundamentally saying. And then 2 is then it's just practice. So now having that, now just keep getting there. And yeah, now I rarely edit any of my work on the internet. I actually tell people it's all practice for me. I actually don't like sit down, write, edit, sit on it. I just like go and publish. And I treat everything on the internet as I'm practicing in public. I treat the polished stuff as books or longer works. Those are ones that I sit, I edit, I really like take my time with.
Gotcha. And in school, we have this, you know, turn in a 10-page report about X. Do you think that's where people are trained to say the same thing in multiple sentences over and over again? Like, why don't we just learn to be concise, like you're telling us from the get-go?
So, yeah, my controversial answer to that is, I mean, I would argue that like literature teachers or English teachers or whatever, unless you are a active practicing writer or author yourself, you might be really knowledgeable about grammar or about the language or the history of the language, but you're not a writer. You're not going to be able to teach me how to write because you don't write. And writing to me isn't just putting words on a page. Writing is actually proving that you can say things that people want to listen to. So for me, I mean, even in terms of college, I was taught by some talented authors and they actively practiced. But at the end of the day, you have to yourself be willing to practice a lot and put in that volume. And someone can nod at things or point at things, but you have to be the one to really put it into practice. I don't know that rate of revel. I guess to answer your question more directly too is, yeah, school definitely encourages students to just they base value off of word count, and I think that's where a lot of freelance writers make a mistake too. Is they go, I price my services based on words, but if I give you like a very very valuable 7-sentence or 7-word sentence that makes a light bulb go off in your head. Writing is all about the rate of revelation or speed. 8 words. It's a very valuable 8 words. But if I just go, like apple, tomato, desk, like, like give you 8 words, but that's not going to be the same value. So writers that base their value off of how many words they write, to me, is missing the point. You don't pay me to write you 800 words. You pay me to create a feeling for you, or to create a flow for you, or a tone for you. That is very different than 800 words. That's the worst measure for writing, period. So whether you're a blogger, a freelance writer, an author, that's why I encourage everyone, get away from the 30 cents per word or whatever, and move more into what is the final product that you're actually supplying someone with, and base your value off of that.
So 4,000 articles is sounds like a lot. It sounds like it would take a lot of time. I'm curious because you've gotten good at writing. You were one of the top ranked players of World of Warcraft, so you got good at gaming.
Mm-hmm.
You've gotten good at several things, and I think I saw somewhere about piano as well. You're a piano player.
I played classical piano for 18 years. Yeah.
So what's your approach to skill building now that you've sort of gotten really good at several things in your lifetime?
Great topic. So I've been trying to come up with what that process is, because for me it was never one that was super conscious. I'm someone who's very, very led by curiosity. If I get curious about something, I will just immerse myself in it. So I think before you even kind of begin unpacking that process, I don't think that it's possible to obtain mastery of something that you are not deeply curious about. Because it's impossible for you to will yourself to the same level with which someone else is curious. If you're curious, you will spend hours and hours and hours and hours, and it'll feel like nothing. It'll just fly. If it's will-based, that will be very taxing for you. And so that's why growing up, I really disagreed with this whole mentality of, authority figure or whomever telling me, this is the skill that's meaningful in the world. You need to do this. You need to know this. Like growing up, you need to be good at math. I'm never going to be curious about math, ever. So for me, it's like, do you go with the thing that you just are more naturally going to move in that direction? Or do you go with the thing that maybe someone else tells you to do, or is more quote unquote guaranteed to be successful or whatever, but is going to be very taxing on you because that's not who you are? So I opted no on that. I follow my curiosity, and my curiosity has always led to, well, if you get good enough, then opportunities open up. So that's step one. Step two, I think, is you have to immerse yourself in some sort of community related to that thing that you want to be the best at. So in all different chapters of my life, that same thing has been present. So when I played World of Warcraft and I wanted to become one of the best players in the world, I was curious about it. That's what I loved. That's what I wanted to do. I surrounded myself with the other best players on whatever server I was playing on. And whenever I outgrew that server, I would transfer, go to another server. I would find the next better tier of group of players, and I would hang around them, I would spend time with them, and I would go, I want to learn from you. And I just kept doing that higher and higher. With bodybuilding, same thing. Walked into the gym, noticed all the big guys in the back. And I was like this, just starting out, and I would just like kind of lift near them and try and overhear their conversations. And finally, one day, one of them saw me, and he was like, "Hey man, I see you here like every night, 5 p.m., like on the dot every night." And I like saw that as an open door, and I was like, "Oh, can I ask you some questions? Like, can I get to, And he invited me to lift with him the next day. We ended up becoming great friends. Lifted with him for 2.5 years. Hung around like that whole group of guys, and I absorbed their knowledge, and I put on 70 pounds of muscle in the process. And then same thing in advertising. I didn't take higher paying jobs. I worked at a small agency because I had direct access to the creative director, and he was willing to mentor me and spend time with me. So I knew that that was more valuable than like sitting in a cubicle but making 10 grand more at a big ad agency. And then same thing with what I'm doing now. Right when I moved out to LA, I met one of the most successful copywriters I've ever met. And we hit it off, and he's achieved way more than I have, but we approached the craft from different lenses. And he was like, let's spend time together. We'll grab breakfast. We'll trade knowledge. You teach me what you know. I'll teach you what I know. And that made my growth curve skyrocket. So in all of those examples, I see it over and over again. You can't do it alone. You will learn faster by surrounding yourself with people that are doing the same thing. And then the moment you outgrow whoever you start with, then you have to find, well, what's the next tier? And what's the next tier? And the higher that you climb, all of a sudden you are one of the best. You don't even know how you got there. You just kept looking for new people to learn from. Curiosity. You're following your curiosity. You're saying, I want to learn the next thing. And then next thing you know, you're at the top of the ladder. And I think those two mechanisms are why I move so quickly, because I like get curious about something. I find what the group is. I immerse myself in it. I learn what everyone else around me knows. And then I move on to the next thing. I move on to the next thing.
Wow. Yeah, that's of course. I mean, of course, that's how it works. It makes so much sense. The thing you said about growth curve, it's worth mentioning, I think, because I studied microbiology, and when you have single-celled organisms, they double, they split and become 2 cells, and then they split and become 4. And, so say that happens every hour. Then eventually you're going to have 1 trillion cells. And there's this curve of the growth of the organisms on your petri dish or in your vial or whatever. And it's this curve that sort of like goes flat, and then there's the hockey stick, and it shoots up. And it's really interesting to think about the parallel between growth in a skill and growth in a biological sense. I'm sure there's an analogy there, but what I'm imagining is that there's some inflection point, like you put in all this learning and it doesn't seem like things are taking off, and then that's what the overnight success thing is. Once you hit this inflection point, and all of a sudden you're still learning twice. You're still doubling your skill or whatever, but it's way more noticeable at a certain point.
Well, okay, I love that analogy. I think what it is that when you're first starting out, one cell turning to 2 is the equivalent of like, where's my local gym? I have my gym membership. That's like a super small increase, but it's a tiny step forward. You're like, I've never entered a gym before, so now I'm there and I have my membership. Then like 2 to 4 is like, I got my membership, now like, what's my routine going to be? And then 4 to 8 is like, my routine's here. I didn't do my routine very well the first week, but I made it 2 days out of the week. Then 8 to 16. And so each one of these changes in the moment feels so insignificant. It feels so small. But each one has to come before the next one. And I think that's where so many people, they get so caught up because they start, and I run into this, but I've done this in so many different ways now that I know what the process is consciously, is when I start something, yeah, of course it's hard. And yeah, of course I get frustrated. And of course I'm just like everyone else, that I go, I don't even think this is going to go anywhere and I want to give up. But every time I think about that, I remember, the first time I logged into the World of Warcraft and had no idea what an MMORPG was and how many steps I had to take. Or I remember showing up to the gym and being 100 pounds and never having lifted a weight before in my life. So I can look back on those experiences now and remind myself, oh yeah, this is just where the process is. And whenever I get stuck, I try and draw the metaphor and think back, like, where in that path am I right now? And then I'm like, oh, okay, I'm like still getting my routine down. And then it helps give me context as to how far along I am. But something I want to add to what you had said, or that process of how you become really good at something. I think a lot of people will like do those early steps where they go, I'm following my curiosity and I'm like surrounded by people that are doing it too.
Sure.
But then there's a third one, that is, you have to also outwork all of the people that are around you. So for me, finding the community was tough, but I was the one who, the big dude at the gym would go, hey, you really need to be eating, 300 more carbs every single day. And I would show up the very next day and be like, I feel like I want to throw up, but I did it. Now what? Like I outworked everyone all the time. And so that's the reason people want to mentor other people, is when they go, I'm going to give you, it's a gift, I'm going to give you a realization that you wouldn't have gotten on your own until much later. I'm going to give it to you earlier. And then how you reciprocate that gift is you integrate it. People don't want to mentor people that don't take advantage of the gift. If someone gives you that and you just go, yeah, I got it, they're going to go, okay, I'm not going to give you anymore because you clearly don't need it. You don't want it. Why would I give you something that you don't want? But for me, every time someone said, you should be doing this, or hey, I remember being where you were 3 years ago, you should do this, instantly I trusted, I integrated it, and I showed up the next day and was like, what's next? And that process is why I've been able to attract every single one of those pursuits. I've attracted a mentor that had mastered it. Every single one. And the reason why is because I show up and I go, I don't have an ego about it. I'm not here to prove to you how much I know. It's the opposite. I'm asking questions. I want you to know how little I know and how hungry I am to learn. And someone's like, I'm going to give you that gift over and over and over again. And I reciprocate it by being a good return on their investment. I'm like, if you teach me, I will make you proud. I will do great things with what you give me. And that's the intrinsic value of mentorship.
I'm curious about the people that don't integrate versus the people that do. And you mentioned ego. Do you have any more thoughts about what makes you able to consistently integrate? It sounds like it's just like, okay, boom, you told me something, and I'm going to try it and do it. There's no stickiness in there. But for other people, it's like, okay, yeah, you told me what to do, and I really want to try it, and then they just don't. What do you think's the difference there?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's very, very rooted in self-awareness. I think it's your ability to trust what someone else is saying. It's this weird counterintuitive thing. I think a lot of people don't trust because they fear that they'll waste their time, So they're like, I don't want to take someone else's advice because what if I run in the wrong direction? But then what they do is then they just end up not doing anything. So it's not like you gained or lost anything. You just chose to go watch Netflix instead. You were going to waste your time either way. So for me, and I see this with people a lot, is even people will reach out to me and want advice or like insight or something, and they'll they'll go, I really want help as a writer, or I want help with this thing in my life. And I'll start to give them something. I'll start to give them a gift. And then they'll want to just explain to me all of the reasons why they can't. And that's like, and it sounds like a very brutal truth, but it's the reality is that's not my job. That's not my role. That's not the gift that I can give you. Like, I can lend an ear. I can sit there and listen to you if you like, but so could pretty much everybody else in your life. What I can give you that someone else can't is I can give you like a piece of insight that you wouldn't get until much further along on the road. So when someone comes and all they do is explain all the reasons why they can't, they think they're connecting with the person, or they think that they're gaining some knowledge, but in reality, they're closing themselves off, which means then the person with the knowledge can't actually give them anything helpful, because I'm just sitting there going like, okay, I understand you're experiencing all of that, but that's a you thing. That's your issue.
Yeah. And, I think it is challenging to assume that you can do something that you've never done. I mean, basically that's what you're saying. Like, I assume that because someone else has done it, that it'll be possible for me. And then our experience says, I've never done this thing. How do I know I can do it? And so it's almost a catch-22. And then so trust, is, or faith in your own ability to try something and have it work. It seems like such an important piece there.
And of course, now my perspective on it is a little different, because like I said, I can look back on those experiences and remind myself of that. But yes, in the beginning, yeah, I honestly think it was just me loving the adventure so much. The art of adventure. Yes. I was so fascinated, and I enjoyed playing World of Warcraft so much, or I enjoyed going to the gym so much, that a lot of those lessons for me just, it's not like I woke up and said to myself, this is a conscious decision that I'm going to, overcome this obstacle in myself and I will have this big life lesson. Like, I just loved it. And a lot of these things are things that I've reflected on after, and I've realized, oh, this is how this is what was working. But in all of them, the one thing that was conscious for me was, if I want to get better, play with better people.
I think that a lot of people probably are really curious about things and feel pressure from somewhere, society, teachers, family, to do something that has a clear path or outcome. It's not necessarily clear like what playing World of Warcraft or what getting World of Warcraft might do for you in terms of opportunities. What do you say to someone who is really curious about exploring something that doesn't have a established career trajectory, or is just a weird new thing? What would you say to someone that wants to explore something that's unconventional like that?
First, it's possible. Like, one of the reasons why I love studying even industries that I know I'm never going to master or anything, but I love looking at so many different examples of things, because it helps remind you of some bigger either archetypes or just lessons in life. Like, one, I remember a few years ago, I came across this magician. I forget his name, but obviously had mastered his craft and had turned that into, now he, performs around the world. He's got, books and magic, instructions and his own magic tricks that he's patented and that he sells. And he's built just like a multi-million-dollar brand and business for himself out of magic. This thing that probably every single person growing up told him was a complete and utter waste of time. And I think that's where you have to, something that I'm learning just on my own path is, I really don't think that there is a all-encompassing answer really for anything, but for this idea in particular, because I I truly believe that with anything that you want to become great at in life, you can become financially successful at it in some way, shape, or form. The problem is that becoming really great at something and becoming financially successful at it are two very different things. So you could be a super, super talented magician, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be the one to, bring in the entrepreneurship side and make it something special. So I think that's where I had to confront this too in myself as a writer. It's like in the beginning, I thought, I just need to master the craft of writing. But the truth is that really only opens one set of doors. And there's a whole other set of doors around marketing, positioning, branding, entrepreneurship, cash flow, hiring, all these other things that go, I want to be a writer that, owns my craft or expands into other territories, or I don't have to listen to anyone else. I can do this on my own. So that's why I think part of that conversation needs to be, well, what do you truly want? Some people say that they want to be financially successful or whatever at their one thing, but they don't want to take the time to learn the business side of it. So
yeah, it's the if you build it, they will come sort of fallacy. You need to be really good and also get it in front of people. Great segue to back to building a personal brand and getting in front of people. What's your I know you help a lot of executives and CEOs and things build their personal brand and become thought leaders. What are some of the key parts of that process when you are doing that for somebody?
So we, as a company, so my company, Digital Press, has done this, and then myself, I've consulted with a handful of companies or projects that I'm really, really passionate about. And after having done this for 150 people at this point, founders of really impressive tech companies, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, investors, venture capitalists, Grammy winners, New York Times bestsellers, Olympians, like all over the board.
Yes.
And the crazy thing is that the process is actually nearly identical for every single person, which is this idea of, first of all, I always have to kind of redefine for people, what does having a personal brand or what does being seen as a thought leader mean to you? And for me, my definition of it, and I think why I've been able to open the doors that I have for myself, is that I don't see it as a destination. I see it as a journey. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of, especially in the business world, there's this mentality where it's, I'm just going to hire a PR firm real quick. I'm going to get a few logos saying I've had work featured in, these 3 publications, whatever. And then whoa-bam, I'm a thought leader in my industry. And the reason why that's ironic to me is because that doesn't achieve the true goal at all, which is I want people to actually see me as an authority. I want people to actively listen to what it is that I say about what I'm immersed in or what my industry is or whatever type of company I'm building.
Yes.
So now you have two opposite goals, because you can't buy that, so someone goes, I'm just going to get the logos, but then they don't get this. And then if you try and get someone to actively share what they know over time, it triggers that impatience that we talk about with the mastery, like the bell curve, is in the beginning, you barely see anything. But what everyone misses is it's that consistency over time that eventually creates the hockey stick effect. So I went from, being just some college kid with no writing portfolio to, entrepreneur / top writer all over the internet. And the only reason wasn't because someone else said that I'm that person. It's because I have been actively sharing things that I know or observe or think about for 5+ years on the internet. And you can't buy that. And you have to earn that. And so I disagree very fundamentally with the whole agency approach of we're going to spend 3 months putting together this big fancy strategy for you that is created by people that have never actually done the thing that they're recommending. And then I'm going to go, pitch a byline or two to a big publication. And we're going to say, you've been featured in these pubs that people barely read. And then, we're going to spend all this money on like a cool, like 30-second, video that talks about how amazing you are. Like all of that is counterproductive to the true goal that you're going for, which is I just want people to know who I am at scale. And that's exactly, we started this podcast with you saying, I was just reading a bunch of your articles.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. That's the whole point.
And it sounds, so to bring it back, I mean, if the article is something that people can read quickly without feeling like they've read it, and then they go and read more, is that as simple as it needs to be to build a loyal following? Or are there other components that are important? So
that I would say is the form. That's typically the form of it, like the general structure and approach. The core or the content, the thing that I talk a lot about is this intersection between answering the reader's question and doing so by telling a personal story. So what I mean by that is, let's say you want to start a podcast and you come across one of my articles, you find your way there through Google, through Quora, friend shares a link with you, whatever. And your question as a reader is how to start a podcast. And the title of this article is how to start a podcast, 3 things that you need to know. So in the beginning, you go, oh, this is for me. And you start reading, and the article, all it does is just say, podcasts are great these days. You should really start one. It'll be super great if you can have a podcast following, because then you can do this thing. And it's never actually answering your question, which is, but how do I actually start a podcast? Like, what's the first step? What's the second step? So that first piece is really, really important because that dictates whether or not the reader goes, you're wasting my time. I trust you or I don't trust you. They came to you. They said, I have a question. You didn't answer it. They don't find you productive anymore. Mm-hmm. So then how you start to measure the value of what you write or what you create, the same applies for video, for any type of content, is then you start valuing, well, how deeply do you answer the person's question? So let's say then you find another blog that says how to start a podcast. And it's like, in order to start a podcast, you need to, step 1, come up with a catchy name. Step 2, figure out how you're going to get guests. And step 3, practice, practice, practice. And you go, okay, like that was kind of helpful. And then, so you keep searching and then you come across another post. And then the third post is like the comprehensive guide to starting a podcast. Then you go, okay, well, of those 3, this is definitely the most valuable so far. It tells you everything, like here's what type of mic you should be considering. Here's how you can do podcasts in person versus over the internet. Here's how, like, it just breaks it all down. You're going to see that as the most valuable of the 3.
Yes.
And then whoever wrote that, you're probably going to be like, this person knows something. Maybe I'm going to check out more of what they're saying. And so it's again, it's not 800 words for the sake of 800 words. It's how do you actually answer the reader's question in a way where they don't see any other type of content as any, like, remotely as valuable as what you created. And then the second part that makes it memorable or that makes it special is then if that person explaining all of that to you weaves in a personal story. So say you click on that third article and it's this comprehensive guide to starting a podcast and it answers all of your questions. It's really, really good at giving you the information that you need. But all throughout it, the author, he or she is going, you need this type of mic. Let me tell you, one time I went and interviewed this person, really well-known person, and I ended up using this mic instead. Horrible outcome. The audio was fuzzy, all this stuff, and I had ruined this great opportunity with this really, really accomplished person. The reason why that's so effective, this is a creative writing, fiction writing technique, is because now as a reader, you're going to remember that. So you're reading that, and it's not just answering your question. Now you actually have a visual. You can visualize that person walking into to interview someone they couldn't wait to interview. Maybe it was they went to interview Mark Cuban. They were so excited, and then they used the wrong microphone. You are going to remember that scene arguably more than you're going to remember even like the actual details of the article. So when you have those two pieces and you can fluctuate between the two, that's what makes someone remember what it is that they're reading and visualize it more. And then if you start using those stories as your own stories, then people start to feel like they know who you are. And that is how, same way, you started reading my articles before I came on here. And you were like, I know things about you. I have things that I want to talk about. So by answering the reader's question and by putting story woven into it, I'm now effectively scaling who I am as a human being.
That is powerful and so simple and wonderful explanation. It makes so much sense. And I'm excited to go and experiment with writing like that.
Same is true, by the way, for your podcasts. I mean, I'll tell you, like, what's the one thing that I'm going to remember most from this conversation? Your analogy about biology and you saying, I studied this.
Oh, interesting.
That's a story, right? So halfway through our conversation, you were like, hey, something that is related. I studied this. I learned this. This applies to what we're talking about. Didn't waste too much time, right? You didn't give me like a 3-hour explanation of what studying biology was like. You just said what you needed to say, and then we moved on to the next thing. And that, as a reader or as a listener, I'm going to remember.
Wow, cool. This has been really fun. Learning lots. I'm sure the listener is as well. We've got a wrap here. So where's the best place for people to? I mean, you're all over the internet. Where's the best place for people to find you or get in touch with you should you wish to be found?
Probably, shoot me an email through my site, nicolascole.com. Otherwise, always writing new stuff on Quora, minutesmagazine.com, and Medium. Medium. I'll repost some new stuff. It's all over. You can find it.
Brilliant. Really, really appreciate that. That was a lot of fun. Thanks for coming on the show.
No, you ask great questions, man. I appreciate it.
All right, a lot of good stuff there from Nicolas Cole. I definitely will be trying what he's talking about, the intersection of answering questions and including your own story. That seems really fun and also a really powerful way to, what did he say? Scale yourself as a human. Just love the way he approaches things and obviously, thinking of mentorship as an investment. You're investing, they're investing, and how can you both get the best return on investment? Such a good way to look at that. So it makes total sense that he's been able to excel in so many different fields. I invite you to go read some of his writing and see if you're pulled along just like I was when I was doing my research and found it so easy to read through his stuff. And if you learned something from this episode, send us a shout out on Instagram. Both of us are available on Instagram. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast already, please do. That would be super helpful. It helps other people find out about the show. And if you're on iTunes, would love for you to leave a 5-star rating and review if you feel called to. That also really helps out the show. Finally, I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, if you're working on building your own business as a thought leader in any different field, I invite you to apply for a free strategy session with me. I'm working with thought leaders in the travel industry, education, parenting, and media, to name a few of the different fields right now. And so I invite you to check it out, to apply, and we'll hop on the phone for a conversation, and I'll give you some of my best coaching for free and see if it might make sense for us to work together. So that's at derekloudermilk.com/coaching. All right, that's all for today's episode. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.